What up, y'all? This is Patrick Hayes, and in this video I want to talk about how to balance your relationship energy dynamics. So whether this is a love relationship or whether it's just a friendship, I'm going to go through 4 different things that you can do, 4 different areas that you can focus on that will drastically improve any relationship across the board. So the first thing I want to talk about is creating clarity or purpose for your relationship, right? So creating coherency amongst the two of you, or however many there are. This could be for a whole family too. But creating clarity and coherency amongst you as to what the relationship's purpose is and what you're actually here to do. So you can think of this as kind of like a mission statement. And this is so important to create a conscious mission statement, something that you've discussed with each other. Because if you don't do this, essentially you could think of it like you might be trying to build a Camaro and they might be trying to build like a 4-wheeler, right? People oftentimes have completely different ideas for what the relationship is, or where they want it to go, or what it's there to do, what the purpose is. And until people come on the same page about these things, you're destined to run into issues, because the truth of the matter is everybody's extremely complex and people see things extremely differently. So until you come together with some sort of agreement, some sort of mission statement for what the relationship is, then you're inevitably going to run into problems or errors whenever you see things different, or have different values, or have kind of like a different intention for where to go with the relationship. So the idea is to truly treat it like a mission statement. Come together, say, what would we like our relationship to be? What would we like it to look like? What would we like it to look like in the short term? What would we like it to look like in the midterm? What would we like to look like in the long term? So you can really bring all those 3 different timelines together, all of your different ideas for what you hope it to be, what you want it to be, and come to an agreement. You know, if you can't come to an agreement on that, then it's probably not a relationship that is going to succeed. But if you can come to an agreement and then you periodically check in about this, then you're going to be coherent in your intentions for the relationship, and this is going to be a foundation that is invaluable for the success of your connection. Okay, now the next thing that's really, really huge is communication. Now, there's a lot of different aspects to communication. So I'm just gonna go into a couple things that I think are really important, and they're kind of salient for me right now. So first off, I made a video on communication not that long ago, and this video is really, really potent for understanding some of the flaws in communication, and then some really key points for being able to communicate with each other and have clarity. So to really create clarity between the understanding between both of you, which is something you actually need to do in order to fulfill the first step that I just suggested. So go watch that video. I'll put a link to it right here. There's also some other things that I want to bring up right now regarding communication. And the first thing is creating a safe place for communication. Because this is one of the major flaws that a lot of people have in their relationships, is they haven't been able to truly cultivate a safe space for people to communicate honestly, right? And in order for a relationship to work, you need to communicate honestly with people. You need to tell your partner what's actually going on with you. You have to be able to be honest and feel safe expressing your honesty, right? And the issue is that a lot of people are afraid to say things because they're afraid to be punished by the other person, or they're afraid to insult the other person. And so a lot of stuff goes unsaid, and then due to all these gaps in the understanding of where each other are coming from, it causes a bunch of issues. And so, you know, it's easier said than done. There's a lot of, deep work you have to do in order to create a sacred, safe space to communicate. But it is something that is absolutely an imperative for creating a healthy relationship. So how do you create more of a safe space? Well, this comes back to personal work, right? Because in order to be able to hold space for somebody when they're expressing something to you that could be insulting, could bring frustration up, it could bring jealousy up, it could bring feelings of inadequacy up. Basically, it could trigger any of our wounds, right? And this is oftentimes why people don't express stuff, because they're afraid of creating this kind of a situation. But what has to be understood here is that if, as I mentioned in a previous video, which I'll put a link to right here, if you're really going to have a successful relationship, both parties need to really want what's best for the other person in that other person's own terms, right? They really are going to need to be investing in the success of the other person individually also, right? It can't just be for the success of the relationship at the expense of the individual, or it can't just be at the success of me, one individual, at the expense of the other, right? It has to be investments into the success of the other individual also. In order to do that, you have to really want what's best for that person. And you have to be willing to accept wherever they are and however they truly feel and however they truly think about things in order for you to truly support that. The idea is that when the person's being honest with you about what's going on with them, getting angry at them for being honest is actually, you're getting angry at them for not being who you want them to be, right? So you're actually wanting them to be something other than they are. And this is really key. If you're angry at somebody, I'll say it again, if you're angry at somebody or you're resentful at somebody for being honest with you, then what you're actually saying is that it's not okay that you are the way you are or you're doing what you're doing, right? And if you really want to help somebody grow and evolve and become their best person, you have to accept who they are. You have to accept them when they express themselves as being honest. Now, it doesn't mean it's going to be easy or that you're not going to be triggered, there's not going to be stuff coming up. But if stuff's coming up, what you have to realize is that your job in this moment is to not project that onto that other person, but just honor that that's where they're at. Honor that they're being honest and appreciate that they're being honest. Now, it may cause emotional distress for you. And when you feel that distress, instead of getting angry at them or making them feel bad or guilty or trying to project some sort of negative energy onto them, what your job is to do is to track how you're feeling emotionally and then just be honest about how you feel emotionally. So if you feel the emotion of wanting to lash out at them, control yourself and just be honest. Say, listen, I feel like when you're saying that, it makes me feel inadequate or it makes me feel jealous, and I have a feeling like I want to lash out at you and be angry at you, but I realize that this is coming from a space of being hurt, and I'm feeling hurt, and so this is how I'm feeling, and this is how I'm responding to what you are saying right now. So you can express how you feel without moving into a kind of unconsciousness where you're projecting or you're getting angry, you're trying to lash out or lash back at the other person because they made you feel bad. And this requires personal work. You have to look into why you're wounded, what's going on inside you. You need to look at your belief systems and why your belief systems are making you feel different ways. You need to talk with the other person. This is a deep process in order to get through these things. But the more sovereign we are in our emotional state when we're able to communicate with people, and the more we genuinely want what's best for them, and the more easy it is to accept people when they're being honest, and then to work as a group to truly support each other to become the greatest people that we intend to be. Now, another thing regarding communication that's really important too is honoring the timing of when situations change, right? So as you probably notice in relationships, there are certain periods of time where things seem to be really synced and it's going really well, and then there are other times where it seems like, you gotta lose your stability and the relationship's rocky, or you're having disagreements and frustrations with each other. So what you'll notice is that usually when a relationship goes from a stable space to an unstable space, there was some sort of dynamic change that happened. Something was introduced into your reality, or some sort of circumstance changed in the reality that shifted the dynamic. And what often people fail to do is to notice when there's a dynamic change very early on, and then have the kind of communication that reorients your relationship to the new dynamic, right? Really often what happens is people are in a certain dynamic in their relationship, and then something comes in and changes, and there's not really a conversation about the change or how you're processing it or how to reorient to this new difference in your life. And then as a result, both people are kind of perceiving it differently and moving with it differently, and they find themselves out of sync, and then conflict arises. So the idea is to be aware of dynamics, and when dynamics change, the intention should be, okay, I've noticed this dynamic change, let's come together and let's reorient around this, right? So you can nip it in the butt before it turns into a bigger problem. Now the next one is really, really huge, and this has to do with behavioral boundaries and personal needs. And this is something that requires a lot of personal work also, because in order to truly show up in a relationship and express what you need and what your boundaries are, you need to be clear within yourself about what they are. So this requires you to do some introspective work where you truly ask yourself, what are my boundaries? What is within the realm of acceptable and what's within the realm of unacceptable? as far as behavior for the other person, as far as space that you need, or all sorts of different things. You create whatever your boundaries are. You need to create a clear boundary line of what you demand in the relationship in order for it to be a relationship that you are willing to continue to invest in, right? And you need to be able to clearly state that to the other person. At the same time, you need to be able to clearly state what your needs are. And you could think of that as a boundary also, but I think like more articulately, it's like, what are your needs? So what do you need from the other person? What kind of connection do you need? What kind of communication do you need? What kind of time do you need from that person? You need to be able to clarify these things. And then you need to be able to express them to the other person. Now, the thing we also have to be aware of here is that boundaries and needs change over time. So again, like I mentioned in the last step, you also have to be willing to reorient when you have a shift in boundaries or when you have a shift in needs. And you need to both be willing to have that conversation when it comes up. But again, it requires a lot of introspective work to really clarify what your boundaries are. And here's the thing. Things are always changing. You're always growing. And your boundaries and your needs are sometimes not known because there's uncharted territory that you didn't know you were going to move into. And when you move into this uncharted territory, wow, like you might be disoriented. You might not know what's going on. And this is why it's especially important to create that safe communication space of reorientation so that when a new dynamic comes up or you hit uncharted territory, that each person in the relationship has the freedom to kind of reorient themselves and clarify where their boundaries are within this new topography, and also clarify where their needs are within the new space that you've entered into. So realize sometimes it's not going to be defined, but when you realize that that's what's going on, like, oh, okay, we're in a new space and I'm not sure where my boundary is, you can have that conversation. Because otherwise what happens oftentimes is, the more passive one might not set the right boundaries right off the bat because they're still kind of clarifying to themselves what's going on. And the more active one or aggressive one might go ahead and encroach upon someone else's boundaries because that's just the nature of like how they express themselves. And then 6 months down the line, it's become such a stable habit that it's hard to break out of. So if you're in a space where it's uncharted territory and you haven't quite set your boundaries yet, have that conversation. Let that be expressed. If you haven't expressed what your needs are, let that be part of the conversation. I'm not quite sure what my needs are. This is new territory. I'm not sure what my boundaries are. This is new territory. This way it keeps the relationship somewhat liquid and people don't get caught in patterns that end up being really disruptive and hard to shift later on. Okay, now the last one I want to talk about is taking space. And this is absolutely huge. And the reason why taking space is so important, in fact, there's a million different reasons. But the one I want to talk about right now is because when you take space is when you are going and you're gathering new fruits to come back and share with the relationship. If all your time is spent with the other person in the relationship, then there's nothing really new. There's nothing fresh. It's like you guys are both experiencing the same thing all the time, and it doesn't allot for the kind of biodiversity, if you will, that's necessary for a relationship to truly flourish. Now, due to a lot of trust issues, people feel like they're afraid to separate from their person. Maybe they have abandonment issues. And these are things that people really need to look at because this is probably the number one killer of a lot of different relationships. Is where somebody is over clingy or they need to be with the person all the time in order to feel safe or in order to not feel abandoned, right? So it's really important to look at these underlying issues. If we have underlying traumas surrounding trust, surrounding abandonment, this is stuff that needs to be worked on. We need to go see a therapist. We need to see some sort of trauma release therapist. We need to do our work so that we can give each other the freedom necessary for us to go and evolve ourselves on our own terms with no compromises, off in our own space, so that we can become more of ourselves and then bring that back to the relationship. Now, I made a video about taking space. I think I called it, This Could Save Your Relationship. And I'm going to put a link to the video right here, and I go really in depth on this particular topic. And it's something that's absolutely crucial to have a healthy relationship because, like I said, if you don't have the biodiversity, there's no freshness coming into the relationship, and eventually it will become stale. And then people, when they spend too much time together, it's kind of like eating the same food over and over and over. Your body develops an allergy to it, and you start resisting that person and basically become like an irritant to you. So it's really important to be able to take the space for people to take a deep breath, get some fresh air, go do their own thing, and then when they bring back all the new experiences and insights and cool things to the relationship, that helps the relationship as a whole. So then you have two independent people that are creating a synergy that creates more than the sum of both the parts. So that's what I got for you today on how to balance your relationship energy dynamics. So if you have any questions or comments, feel free to put them in the comments below. If you're interested in expanding on any of these particular topics, let me know which one and I'll make another video on it. And if this video was useful to you or you think it's useful to anybody else, please share it. I would really appreciate if you shared my content. So thanks so much. This is Patrick Hayes, one love, and I'll talk to you next time.